We're here obviously to celebrate our beloved Sandy's life. He was a wonderful and loving husband, devoted to Kathy. He was a wonderful and devoted and loving father and grandfather. He was a great friend. He was a dedicated social justice activist for more than 50 years. He had a great sense of humor. He was a great brother and uncle from everything I've heard. Got no evidence to the contrary. He was extraordinarily brilliant, and I think anybody who ever had a conversation with him figured that out pretty quickly. He was a musician, and he was kind and generous, and at the bottom of all of that, he had a big heart. And we're here to celebrate his life. I'm sure there's going to be some happiness here. I'm sure there's going to be some sadness in the room. I know that I feel it as well. We're going to have a program that's going to run about an hour, maybe an hour and 5 minutes, but we don't want to gobble up all the time that we have here with this program. His brother Carter is going to do a short bio. David Loud, who's a friend of his for more than 50 years, is going to talk about his early political activism. And his two nieces, Ariane and Allison, are here, and they're going to talk about what a great uncle he was. Tom is here from KSER to talk about the 15 years that Sandy poured into that great community organization. Jay and Caitlin are going to do a little bit of music. Then we're going to have an open mic, and we'd like to encourage you to limit your comments to about 1.5 minutes so that a number of people get to speak. And then I'm going to wrap up with a love letter that I wrote to Sandy 3 days before he died, and that I sent to Kathy and asked her to read to him while he was still lucid, and she did that and said he had a smile on his face as he heard my words through the written page. Just a couple of other things. If you haven't signed the guest book, please do so. It's over at the front table. There's going to be a cake at the end, so don't run out without your piece of cake. And last but not least, we have a 12.5-minute slideshow that, due to technical difficulties, we have not been running. And it's going to get turned on and then run in a continuous loop once we finish the program. So with that, why don't we get started? And the other thing I would ask is please be careful around this equipment up here. Somebody unintentionally almost knocked one of these things over just by pulling on the cord. So just be careful as you're moving around, if you would. We don't want one of these things to blow up and have this be an unnecessary expense and hurt anybody. So how about if Brother Carter comes up here and does a short bio about this wonderful guy who we all love and care about.
I'm going to start out by introducing you to Sandy's sister, Lindsley, who has a short announcement to make about this whole procedure.
Hi, I'm Lindsley, and I'm Sandy's sister. Good. Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, wow, I've never done this before. Oh, my gosh. Well, I was just going to clear up, we have, in our family, he's always been Sanford. My mother's maiden name was Sanford. So she was Sandy way years before Sanford came along, and so he couldn't be Sandy in our family. He had to be Sanford. So we've tried really hard over the last few years to get in the habit of saying Sandy instead of Sanford, but it's really hard to do when you've spent 70 years with that other name. So that's how he's Sanford to us and Sandy to the rest of the world. But whatever we ended up calling him, he was a remarkable man, and we miss him terribly. And I'm now going to turn this over to my brother.
As Mark mentioned, my name is Carter Thompson. I'm Sandy's little brother. I'd like to start out by pointing out that I'm kind of jealous of everyone here because you've known him as an adult. I knew him up until the age of 12 when he went to college and never came back to Texas. So you know him better than I do, okay? So let's start out with that. But I will do a few remarks about what it was like growing up with him, which I think I can add to. Even growing up with him when he was in high school, I was very influenced by him, starting out with his taste in music. As you may have noticed, it's a little eclectic, okay? This is a little different than everyone else is listening to. While all my friends were listening to Top 40 radio, because of him, I was listening to Joan Baez and Pete Seeger and the Clancy brothers and Tommy Macon and Tom Lear. You know, people like that. It was very different from anything else anyone had ever heard of before. When he was in high school, I had no idea that being so smart and so focused was so easy for him. You know, it never struck me that he would have to study. You know, he just naturally got straight A's. He just naturally was on the honors list. He just naturally got accepted to Harvard and Yale. When I hit high school, I discovered I can't do that. You know, that's a whole chore. While he was in high school, he also ran track. And I always, you know, I asked him at one point, why'd you pick track? Why that? He said, because I only have to compete against myself. And that was the way he did everything, was he competed against himself. He wanted to be as good as he could be just for himself. Team sports had no interest for him. He was not a competitor. He just wanted to be the best person he could be. David Loud's going to talk about his experiences at Harvard. He did go to Harvard for 4 years. Then he moved to Seattle. Then he moved to California for years and went back to Seattle again. So his whole career has been here on the West Coast, not so much in Texas. However, there was one interval. In 1978, my dad, who was a pilot, my mother is a pilot, he bought a little Cessna 150 so that I could learn to fly it. Even though I was in law school, kind of busy at the time, you know, stopped everything, learned to fly. Sandy came down to Texas to learn to fly, and he put everything into that. He was working in the shipyards, he was working dock worker jobs, but he learned to fly because that was important to him. So when he went back to Seattle, he had his pilot's license, and that was important because that's something he put into himself, just so I can say I did it. Now, one thing that you may have already figured out, Sandy was very compassionate about the people in his lives. Whoop, step back here. He put a lot of passion into his children. He made sure that he stayed connected with them. When his children were grown, he put that same passion into the library board that he was on. He put that same passion into the radio station, KSER, because that was important to him. In the last 6 months, he put that same passion into my daughter's political campaign. These are things that are important to him, and they're important to me, and I think they're important to all of us. I think it's kind of ironic that he had such a great sense of social justice. Doing justice was that important to him, and yet I'm the one on the bench, not him. It makes more sense he'd be a judge, not me. But that's just the way that it went. But I do want to point out that his greatest skill was in cultivating and in keeping friends. It takes a lot of work to keep friendships going, and he did that. He put his work into it, and that's why we're all here, because of his love of friendship. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Is this loud enough for everybody to hear?
Yes.
Raise your hand if you can hear me speaking at this volume. Okay? So every speaker, if you'd hold this about a couple of inches away from your mouth, we'll make sure that everybody can hear what you have to say. David, why don't you come on up and tell us about Sandy as a political activist in Harvard.
It was because of Sandy that I came to Seattle from Boston in 1969, and for that, I am deeply and forever grateful. I met Sandy in September 1964. We were Harvard freshmen, starting a year-long seminar on the typology of East Asian revolution. I was a socialist and Marxist. Sandy was fresh off volunteering for the presidential campaign of Barry Goldwater. And for those of you maybe too young to know this, he was a arch-conservative Republican, Goldwater. Our fellow seminarians were mostly liberal Democrats. before long, I was really attracted to Sandy across our ideological differences because he was so passionate about things and so engaged intellectually. Our friendship grew, and I can still remember how elated I felt in the spring of 1965 when Sandy told me that he was going to join the March on Washington against the Vietnam War, the first national demonstration against the war that I was helping to organize through Students for a Democratic Society. We rode down and back on the bus together. The 25,000 people, that seems small today, but the 25,000 people who came to DC far exceeded our expectations, and it was really a grand experience. After that, Sandy and I became very close, and we lived together for 2 years, and then near each other for the rest of our time in Cambridge. Sandy, as you know, was a musician. We loved to jam. He on the guitar, me, vocals, harmonica, and later saxophone. And we just had a grand time. We graduated in '68 together. Sandy set out for Seattle in the summer of 1969 and found a job at the Open Door Free Clinic to begin his 2 years of alternative service to the draft as a conscientious objector. I had also been granted conscientious objector status, and I wound up making a really impulsive decision to join Sandy in Seattle rather than stay 2 more years in Boston to do my alternative service. And all I knew about Seattle, truthfully, was it had some hills, it had had a general strike in 1919, and that Sandy was here. I arrived in Seattle about 2:30 one morning, having driven all the way from middle of Montana. And I truly expected that night, then and there, as soon as I entered the door, he and I were going to jam. I was so excited. And when I finally was let into the house, I discovered that he was in California. Our communications were so primitive in those days. I don't think I even had a phone number. I just had an address. The only job that I could find that satisfied my draft board as menial enough was in the laundry at Swedish Hospital. So Sandy and I both wound up in healthcare, quite unexpectedly. But that was the opportunity for what became our most sustained collaboration together in the people's health, which there's a couple of our newspapers posted on the thing back there you can see. But this was a collective of about a dozen activists who were involved in various aspects of healthcare and who wanted to connect the growing ferment in healthcare to the broader struggles for social and economic justice and peace in our country and around the world. So we published this newspaper from 1970 to 1975, and our group played a significant role, actually, in building a healthcare movement from many disparate elements: free clinics, hospital workers, the labor movement, women's health, minority health advocates, universal healthcare advocates, defenders of public health, and much more. And you can see Sandy in a couple photos on those papers posted there. And I will always be grateful for all those years working together with Sandy, and also Mark McDermott was part of the People's Health, and Becky Gibbons, who's here somewhere, was also part of that collective. Becky, where are you? Yeah, Becky. So Sandy and I lived for a couple of years in adjoining duplex units before he left town to pursue his revolutionary ideals in the Bay Area. And after he came back to Seattle and then moved to Everett, we didn't get to collaborate as much or spend as much time together. I attended his and Kathy's wedding, which was really delightful. I am so happy that they found each other. I am so happy. What a blessing. So I was able to visit with Sandy a few times as he was battling his cancer. His thirst for knowledge and his voracious reading habits never waned. Do I step back? Does that help?
Yeah.
Thank you. And visiting him was like being at a really top-level graduate seminar in several fields all at once. What a mind. Some of my most cherished moments with Sandy were this past summer, after he had stopped treatments and knew his end was approaching. He spoke radiantly about living for the day and for the moment, and he was clearly doing just that. That's something that all of us have acknowledged, have said, yeah, we ought to do that. But it's hard, and Sandy's wisdom, of course, was very hard won. He said he felt blessed to be with his friends, freely expressed his love, something that in the course of his life, for me, wasn't that frequent, but he really expressed his love a lot. He also shared that those uplifting feelings were interrupted by fear. They were interrupted by fear. But his love continued to shine through all of that till the very end. And I saw him shortly before his death. And very quickly, this is one of the last emails I sent to him after we had visited. Mark and I had a wonderful visit with him in June of this last year. And I was with my wife, Tuva, and we were going off to France for a trip. And I didn't know if I would see him again. So I said, dear old friend, the hours Mark and I spent together with you this week were precious. We were treated to conversation enriched by your amazing intellectual strengths. Even better, you brought us into your heart. It comforts me greatly to know you are at peace. When it's my turn to face the end of life, I hope I do as well as you. I owe a great deal to you, Sandy. Without your gravitational pull from across the country, I would not have come to Seattle, led the rewarding life I have had here, and been blessed by my own family and offspring. I have so much to be grateful for. If you are still with us after Tuvan and I return July 20, I hope to see you again. If not, know that I love you and cherish the friendship we have had. I wish you the best possible exit from this mortal coil. Yours forever. And Sandy answered, aren't you sweet to say so? I love you. And it gives me something to look forward to and strive for. Beyond Bastille Day, love, Sandy.
Thank you, David, for those heartfelt thoughts and words. Next up is niece Allison. Oh, there you are.
I'm sneaky, you guys. Hey, you guys. Oh, I'm loud today. Yes. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Allison, and this is Ariane, my sister, and we are the Thompson sisters, and of course, there's Thompson brothers, and it's easy to delineate. And we are we're the children of Sandy's younger brother, Carter, and his wife, our mom, Shirley. We're also what's known as the Texas Thompsons. We did not grow up here in Seattle. We live in Dallas. So while we didn't actually get to live in the same place as Sandy, Ariane and I grew up visiting with the Thompsons pretty often, either around the dinner table yelling about the deep state, or skipping stones in the Sound, or arguing in Houston whether that pot was green or blue. Now, anyone who knew our Uncle Sanford knows that he was the most interested and the most interesting person probably ever to walk the earth. So to say he was a wealth of information, as David alluded to, would be a pretty vast understatement. So when we find ourselves a couple years ago on a vacation, we're hiking in a forest trail, I think in Oregon, and he was remarking to Jay about the most accessible elements of a book about quantum biology he recently read. And I made a comment about how diverse his knowledge base is and how it's a shame that he can't share that more often with everybody. and I jokingly remarked that he should start something akin to like an Oprah book club, where once a month he suggests a book that his followers should catch up on. And from this, the Uncle Sanford Book Club was born. He would send me a long email every month about a certain book or an author that he thought, and how he thought about that author and what that book had and how that would add to my knowledge base. And he would also physically mail me the book, or the book on CD, or whatever he could get his hands on. So many of his selections were political selections, because that's what we talked about the most often. And for better or for worse, he's always had an enormous impact on my political ideas. Good luck, world. So he would send me things that ranged from the more popular and mainstream, like Naomi Klein's Changes Everything, to Give Us the Ballot by R.E. Berman, or the more obscure, like The Other Side of Israel and Ecological Imperialism. He also knew the value of switching things up. He would send 50-page books written in the 60s, like The Politics of Escalation of Vietnam, unusual coffee table books filled with images of data, like The Visual Display of Quantitative Information, social science reads like The Spirit Level, and biology and archaeology interests like Catching Fire and Wonderful Life. And then at regular intervals, he'd follow up with what he called an Uncle Sanford report card, where he'd check in to make sure he was selecting good books. And he did not need to send a report card. All of his picks were perfect, from the mainstream to the weird. He always pegged it just right for something that I would enjoy. So after he found out that he wasn't going to be with us for much longer, he started sending more and more books. He didn't want the Uncle Sanford Book Club to end so prematurely, so I'd arrive home to find like 3 to 5 books on my porch at a time. And in all, he sent me 40 different reads, lovingly and hand-selected just for me. And I haven't finished reading them all, and it's truly a comfort to continue to have him a part of my life. I have his wisdom and his input and his overwhelming curiosity every time I pick up one of those books. So, to close, I just want to share a little moment of Uncle Sanford. So anyone who knows Sandy knows that he had the ability to be verbose. He could be a little long-winded, either in person or in email. He could go on for pages and pages with thoughts about just about everything. And some of you know I recently started running for office. And as any candidate or anybody who's ever worked on a campaign knows, as a candidate you receive mountains of unsolicited advice right away, as soon as you announce your candidacy. So the day that I announced my candidacy, I get an email from Uncle Sanford, and it just says, "Ha ha, go get him." That was it. And so, he was a true champion of what's right, of devouring knowledge, of helping out everywhere he could and even where he couldn't. And he was absolutely dedicated to leaving the world a better place than the way he found it. And we are infinitely appreciative for his success in those endeavors.
That was really good. And I just wanted to start by sharing something that we heard from Uncle Sanford quite a lot, actually. I feel better. I hope you do too. So, here's the thing, y'all. And you're jealous. Here's the thing. So Uncle Sanford, right, he was our family's just human superlative. He was a filthy, bleeding heart hippie, an aggressively phlegmatic social instigator, chronic iconoclast, a mainliner of books, and a freebaser of big ideas, a gratuitous hollerer of inappropriate things at inopportune moments, a hot sauce sommelier, and a study in joyful cootery. He was also the most infinitely thoughtful, relentlessly generous, inexhaustibly kind person that I've ever known, and that is a tall order. And y'all, he didn't get that way without having to make some hard choices. It's not like we make it easy to balance being a sensitive, enlightened sapient and a belching, snorting, unapologetic man-savage, even in the year of our Lord, 2018. And that had to be doubly true back in the Eisenhower days when both his parents wore combat boots and raised the kids with a strictly liver and onions lifestyle. Yes. And y'all, I just, more than ever, I'm so glad that my generation of Thompsons got to grow up with his living example, because he spent his life being what I can only think of as a professional American, a truly artisanal citizen. He read omnivorously and reevaluated his conclusions accordingly. He never bought into the 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, knee-jerk tribalism that has so many of us treating our preferred political party like a gang membership. He volunteered at the local radio station, signed petitions, and made phone calls on behalf of his local candidates. Most importantly, and this is a mark I still haven't managed to hit, he knew how to passionately, fully, fundamentally disagree with someone without losing his temper or his sense of humor or his respect for that person's basic humanity. And that is so hard to do, y'all. That is the endangered art that we absolutely cannot let go extinct. We need fierce, educated, articulate activists who will go to the mat for their principles. But we also need those same people to fight just as hard within themselves and within their own movements to hold on to empathy and compassion for the people who, on the other side, to ask questions and to listen and consider what unhealed wounds or legitimate grievances are festering underneath all that obnoxious rancor. And neurologically speaking, it is one of the hardest things in the world to critique your own team, to admit that the other guy has a point, to deliberately flunk your group's purity test and risk being ostracized on all sides. And that is the test that we cannot afford to fail. We cannot afford to sign away our own good judgment and let our team's dogma machine do the thinking for us. We cannot afford to become the club that it uses to beat down our fellow citizens, because singular self-directed human beings, like Sandy, do not trample their neighbors. Stampeding herds do. And Sanford knew that longer than I've known how to tie my shoes, and more that I have he knows so much more than I haven't even started to clue in on. I still don't know how to roll a joint. I don't know how to play the guitar or wear the same tie-dye t-shirt for a funk-free solid week. And my Zydeco and Birkenstocks game is total weak sauce, y'all. And no matter how far we make it in the long run, I know that we will never match the bigness of our Lebowski, our family's exceptional, irreplaceable, once in a generation exceptional, gonzo humanist Renaissance man. And that's just true. But my belch foo is at least good enough to hold the line. And as long as you and I and the rest of us rabble-rousing Yankee wastrels are willing to hang out and drink the beers and shoot the breeze and give until somebody hurts, I expect he'll be all right with that. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the words. Here's the thing, though. I actually wrote those words back in June because I like to follow his example and tell people what I really think about them while they're still around to, drink in my opinions. And about a month after I put that out into the world, I got a letter from him. I had posted something similar to that on Facebook, and I got a letter from Uncle Sanford, like handwritten, like the real archaic thing with the writing on the paper. And I managed to decipher it, what I'm pretty sure it says. And since Allison has kind of been like the Sanford scion, and at least for us in Texas, the words came to me into my mailbox, but I actually think they're for all of us. And so I've invited her to read them for us.
So my sister also goes by Tex. So it says, "Hey Tex, I'm writing to say a big thanks for your beautiful, unexpected tribute about a month back. Hell, you make me sound like Jesus and Einstein's love child or something." So here's a note, on paper, to let you know how much I love and appreciate you. It has been a really impressive, to the point of choking up sometimes, to know you. I love the way you've directed your life. That includes the people you choose, the joys you seek, the upside the head language, the spirit of delight, and the ubiquitous sense everywhere of unlimited possibility. As Papa would say, Great God, Miss Agnes, Katie bar the door. I am really grateful to be a part of your life. I'm grateful for your respect and love. I love to imagine that as part of my immortality, whatever that may turn out to be. Love always, Uncle S. That's all we got.
Thank you ever so much. Is Tom here from KSER to come up and talk about 15 years of fighting to have a great progressive community radio station?
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to thank everyone from Sandy's family who's here, Kathy in particular, and everyone else, because for 15 years, KSER got an incredible amount of time and energy from Sandy Thompson. He was an absolutely remarkable board member, volunteer, help in so many ways. So thank you for giving up so much of Sandy's time for us. And Tex, thank you for that throat clearing, whatever that's. I heard that so many times. And this is the first time in a while I've heard it, so that brought back great memories. I used to have to lie to Sandy. For example, like this event, we were told, do 5 minutes. Whenever we would have events like community forums at KSER, we'd go out and meet people in the community. Different board members would be assigned, all right, you're going to speak for 5 minutes. I would always have to tell Sandy a fake time because he could go on literally, and I'm not exaggerating, he could talk for an hour about KSER and be very passionate and talk about things that I didn't know that about KSER, and I'm supposed to be the manager. So he was incredible in that regard. So if we had 5 minutes for him, for a board member to speak, we'd tell him you've got 2, he'd do 10, 15 sometimes. The other thing I'd always have to lie about Sandy about, he would constantly, and those of you who have been involved at KSER and have been hosts on the air know this because he would call you. He would come into me, he'd come to the station and say, boy, did you hear the music that Leilani played on Friday night? And I'd have to, yeah, I heard, because I typically wouldn't, because he was listening all the time. He'd listen in the evenings, during the day, on the weekends, and he was always telling me about things he heard on the station. And then one day, he and I are talking, and he says, I also record many of the shows, which I'm thinking, why would you do that? And then secondly, when do you ever have time to listen to the recordings, because you're always listening to what is on the air? How, are you listening to both at the same time? But he was a remarkable help in so many ways. And people so far have talked about his ability to make friends. And anytime you're involved in a community-owned organization, there's always a great deal of, let's just say, a certain amount of conflict in trying to resolve certain issues. Sandy was always the person who could bring people together, find solutions, and help move us forward. And I know when he was meeting other people who knew nothing about KSER, sometimes I'd be in some of those settings, and he would just talk forever. He was constantly evangelizing for what he called his special community-owned radio station. Sandy, not only did he come to every board meeting, he was a board member for a long time. Every time we do a pledge drive, he'd come in to answer the phones. He'd bring food for all of the other volunteers who were there. Every day he'd get a list of the people who made donations so he could do charts and graphs to send them to the other board members. At the end of every pledge drive, he'd come in so he'd come into the station in the evenings and make thank you calls to people who made donations to the radio station. And I'd be sitting there sometimes listening to him on the phone, and I couldn't even focus on what I'm doing. I'm so busy listening to what he is saying about KSER. He was truly an inspiring and phenomenal cheerleader for KSER. And we do a number of events at the station. He was always talking about we need to do more events or how we can make events better. And one of his favorite events that he was heavily involved in every year, we would do a Voice of the Community Award, where we would select 6 or 7 individuals who do great work in the community. Sandy always helped set that up. He would always make nominations. He would always help in the selection process. And then this past October, when Sandy was battling his cancer, it was decided that actually Brenda Harrison, a former board president, nominated Sandy for one of those awards. Now, we've never done that before. These are for people external from KSER, not for people who are involved with the station. But Brenda nominated Sandy. The committee agreed, yeah, he should receive a Voice of the Community Award. So last October at Tulalip Resort Casino, we were just so thrilled and honored that Sandy's family could have him there that morning. And we were putting the program together, we were struggling with, all right, because we had 7 people who were going to get awards and get up on the stage and make a speech. And we were trying to figure out, where do we put Sandy in this? Are we going to have him come up first? Because we knew he might be tired and sitting through a 2-hour program, it might be difficult for him to be later. And then we just decided, no, we can't put him first or in the middle. Sandy has to be the last, because no one is going to want to get up on that stage after Sandy gets up and makes his speech. And it was truly an inspiring moment that morning. If you go to YouTube, someone has posted Sandy's speech that day, and it was just a great event. We were so honored he was there. And I'm so glad you're all here today to help us salute Sandy, so thank you.
Thank you, Tom. As we're clearly seeing, our beloved Sandy touched so many people in so many different ways with all of the extraordinary attributes that he had. And now Jay and Caitlin are going to come up and, I guess, continue the Thompson tradition of music to move our hearts and our minds as well. So please come on up.
Twisting the knobs so it can come down. How is that? Can folks hear the guitar? Okay. My brother Charlie and I are both here. I'm going to speak for both of us to say how full my heart is with love and appreciation for all the people who meant so much to my dad and to whom he meant so much. So many of my memories of my dad involve music. In one of David Sedaris' essays about his family, he remembers about his father that when his father would play him a record, short of physically changing color, there was no way you could indicate that you'd appreciated enough what you just heard. No matter what praise you could give to what you just heard, you would just be, no, really listen to that, listen though, man. And my father was the same way. The 2 songs Kate and I are going to sing are things that we remember from our childhood, me and Charlie. The first, you're welcome, I would encourage you please to sing along with both of them. The first is a song by Buddy Holly. We don't have a glockenspiel, but you'll get the idea.
Every day seems a little faster
my dad's spirit of organizing for social justice in mind, I wouldn't want to leave this space without mentioning what's on the back page of the program, which is that my dad really believed in involving community in the causes he believed in. If folks want to make a gift in his memory, the 3 organizations listed on the back that would have just touched his soul so much to know that you contributed to would be the Friends of the Seattle Everett Public Library, the Monthly Review Foundation, a wonderful independent socialist magazine, and then KSER. So please consider, if you're moved, making a gift to them. Here's another one that you're welcome to sing along with, this will be honest.
Darling, you can count on me till the sunrise of the sea. Until then, I'll always be devoted to you. I'll be yours through endless time. I'll adore your charm sublime. Guess by now you know that I'm devoted to you. I'll never hurt you, I'll never lie, I'll never be untrue. I'll never give you reason to cry. I'd be unhappy if you were blue. Through the years my love will grow. Like a river it will flow. It can't die because I'm so devoted to you. I'll never hurt you, I'll never lie, I'll never be untrue. I'll never give you reason to cry. I'd be unhappy if you were blue. Through the years my love will grow. Like a river it will flow. It can't die because I'm so devoted to you.
Thank you, Jay and Caitlin. Now it's time for open mic, and we're going to do this for about 20 minutes. So if any of you would like to come up and say a few words about our beloved Sandy, please come on up. Maybe you can just form a line here. And if you take about a minute and a half to share something, and then I'll wrap up with some final thoughts and feelings about our beloved Sandy and what an incredibly wonderful human being he was.
Okay, so, sorry, I'm a little late. Sandy and I go back, I don't know, maybe 40 years when he moved down to San Francisco to be an organizer. And anyway, so I have 2 kids, and Sandy loved him a lot. And my son Joaquin in particular, and he came to the wedding, So, I guess it was about 10 years ago. It was right about when the Republicans decided to go after PBS. And my son, who was bullied in the past, he put up something on Facebook, a Big Bird. And, it was something like saying, how can you go after Big Bird? And Liberty Prosperity went after him. Liberty Prosperity is the husband of a niece or something, but that was his name on Facebook, Liberty Prosperity. And and it was just vicious. And I thought, his mother can't get up there and, defend him and get on Facebook, so who could do it? And I thought, aha.
Sandy. So I call up Sandy and I explain the situation, and he says, don't worry. And of course, it didn't dawn on me that Liberty Prosperity was messing with public radio and television, So I picked the right guy. And he, honest to God, it's like he had a lifesaver, and he went after Liberty Prosperity with, facts and figures and logic and research and stuff about how the number of 3-year-olds who go to college because of Big Bird. And anyway, I just wanted to say this went on and on and on, dueling back and forth. And finally, after 52 of these, things, my son called me up and he said, Mom, I think I'm just going to take it down, 'cause, so anyway, a month later, to the side, Liberty Prosperity sent my son a message that said peace. So I just want to say thank you, Sandy. I really love you. I really love you guys. So.
Thank you, Betty.
So my name is Eileen Simmons, and I know Sandy from the Everett Public Library, where I worked for almost 20 years and was the recipient of endless book lists for books he thought we should have in the collection, but we didn't yet. And I'm not a believer in an afterlife, but I've always thought that how we live our lives and how we treat others while we're here on Earth determines how we will be remembered. By that criteria, our friend Sandy Thompson has left us a legacy of a life well lived. When I think of Sandy, I remember many excellent meals and bottles of wine, music of all varieties, good conversation, including about politics, movies seen, trips taken, news about kids and grandkids, and of course, books we were reading, and Sandy, as all of you have remarked, was always reading. If Sandy was interested in something, and sometimes it seemed as if he was interested in everything, he wanted to share it with you. If he cared about something, he was a fierce advocate. He's left us a legacy of community participation through his longtime commitment to KSER and the Everett Public Library. And he's left me, and I suspect all of us here today, an example of how to fill your life with all the good things. Friends, family, conversation, food, books, music, travel. There's nothing unusual about this list, but it's easy to forget to take the time to enjoy life. Sandy never forgot. Here's to Sandy Thompson.
Thank you very much. Good luck, Phoenix. Paul?
Thanks, Mark. I'm Paul Rippey, and I am Kate's dad, and Kate is married to Jay, Sandy's son. And I remember the first time I met Sandy when that whole family came over, and there was no magic there between me and Sandy, I'll be real frank. And after he left, I said to Elena something like, well, he had a lot of ideas, It's like Sandy didn't mind expressing himself on many topics, even with complete strangers. And so that was fine. You're not best friends with everybody. That's okay. And then we realized, Kate and Jay were really serious. So we had to be, so we had to look at this again. And I think in our separate paths, we said, well, we sort of summarized it at their wedding when we sang, you say tomato, I say tomato, let's call this whole thing off, but if you call it off, then we'd have to part, so let's call the calling off. And we just got to be, my appreciation of Sandy, and I hope it was mutual, just went up and up and up. And I continue to be inspired by his commitment, which I feel is much stronger than mine, to make a more just economic and social system. And I am inspired by his commitment to his children and our common child and all that. And I don't know if many people that could love their children more than me, but Sandy's right up there. He's a competitor, And I do think this, and I'm at the point in my life, like some of us are, we're sort of the next big life event is dying, and that's cool, you sort of think about things. And I've known people who died, And it was like, so what? I mean, I'm sorry, but it was like, so what? And other people who continue to make a difference long after their biological life is over. And Sandy, for me, is still making a difference. And I don't think you can ask for anything better than that. So Sandy, I mean, it's just this. If he's present here, it's not just that we all were touched by him, but I'm still being touched by him. So Sandy, I know you're not here, but anyway, thank you very much. And it's an honor to be in his family.
Who'd like to go next? There you go.
Hi, I'm Bob Gould, and I'm very overwhelmed here to hear everybody talking about our dear friend Sandy. Patrice and I, and like Betty before us, we sort of represent, I guess, the secret, unknown years of Sandy in San Francisco. So we're glad to share with anybody in the family any of these secrets that we've checked in with the family. There's many questions, and we're here for you to fill you in on those years. But at any rate, we so miss Sandy for everything that people have said here. The music he freely shared, and his incredible commitment. And I don't really have a lot to say that hasn't been said before, and it's been so wonderful to see the love that everybody had for him. I would just say the last time we were here in August, and Sandy was getting a transfusion, and we were with him and Kathy at the hospital. And I can't say enough about what kept him going, and all the love that you've spoken to is there, that he wanted to live long enough to be there in September when the family came. He obviously so wanted to be there for the community event in October where he was at. And he spoke so much, and I just met her before, but Allison, in terms of what she represents and what she's doing in Texas and carrying that stuff on, he was just bubbling over in the hospital about what that really means, and it's just so inspiring to us. And anyway, I just want to leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak?
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my mom is coming up. She's 92 this year. Sandy was my brother-in-law for 40 years, I think. And my mother's beloved son-in-law for just as many. Sandy loved music. When my sister and Sandy got a divorce, we were so grateful we didn't lose him in our lives, and he was so grateful we hung in there with him. He loved music. He followed my mom's career. She sang with the Seattle Symphony Chorale for as long as her eyes could see the music. He followed my career. I'm a studio singer in LA. My mom sang with us when we were like Patty, Bobby, Debbie, 5, 4, 3 years old. And this lyric came to me, very corny, but I thought it was very appropriate, and Sandy would love, if we can make it through this, to hear his beloved mother-in-law sing again. It was a song written as a soldier went off to war in the First World War. It was written and sung to his beloved that he left behind. 1918. This was, okay, Mom. Got the tune? Smile a while. Smile the while you kiss me sad adieu. When the clouds roll by, I'll come to you. Then the skies will seem more blue. Down in Lover's Lane, my dearie, wedding bells will ring so merrily. Every tear will be a memory. So wait and pray each night for me.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? My voice is cracking here a little bit. Anybody else wish to speak? If not, I will,
Hi, I'm a friend of Sandy's. We were among some friends of his. We called ourselves the Pickwickian Club. I would call Sandy a very good book friend. One thing he always kept with him was a list, and he would always ask me what books I was reading, and I would tell him, and he would write the books down, and then he would actually read them. And then I would ask him what books he was reading, and I would remember the books, and then I would read them, and then we would talk about the books we had read. And the books, there was no limit of the books that he was interested in, no subject that he was uninterested in. And I was always impressed with this list, this fantastic list he would keep. And near the end of his life, I gave him a book that was about Woody Guthrie and Bob Dylan and a strike up in northern Minnesota and a labor incident, and the people who owned the mine were from Harvard, and I said, this is a book that's written for you. And I think he gave the book to his son, and he loved that book, and I was thrilled that he liked that book. So he was really a great friend in that sense, in terms of his reading and his knowledge about things, and I'll always treasure that.
thank you. We have about 5 more minutes for open mic. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Hi there, I'm Ewan. I'm Texas, Ariane's husband, so I'm one of the Texas contingent. So mostly when I got to know Sanford, it was in the context of vacations, family get-togethers, which were always joyous occasions, of course. But I'd say he made it more so than anyone else. And we've heard a lot today about how erudite and dynamic and amazing his brain was. But I want to touch on something a lot of people have also raised, which was his warmth. He was an incredibly open and warm person. Even just by way of example, in the midst of his grave illness this summer, my younger brother came over to visit, who had met him once years and years ago at our wedding, and he was so kind and attentive to him in the midst of everything that was happening, and that was amazing. But one particular incident comes to mind, and it's the smallest thing compared to all that he's accomplished in radio and social justice and his family life, of course. It was the smallest thing. We were in a little deeply authentic, hole-in-the-wall Mexican restaurant somewhere in New Mexico, and everything on the menu, deeply, country, Oaxacans, like Mexican. And at one point, the waitress brings out this wonderful seafood soup, and he tastes it. He says, "This is fantastic," and she says, "Oh, thank you, it's Mexican soup." And for him, this was the funniest thing he'd ever heard, this statement of the obvious, and his laughter filled the room. And it was in no way a mean laughter, not at all. It was a welcoming laughter that encouraged the waitress into it, and we just all shared that little moment. And that most obvious of jokes, he found so much joy that he shared with us all. And I think, as well as all that he's accomplished, and all that he's done, and all that he's given to the world, I think just those little moments will stick as much as anything else. And I think the number of people here today is testament to that. So thank you, Sanford. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Then I will wrap up. One of the things that I've learned in life is the more that I love someone and the more joy that I've had with them, the more pain and sadness I must feel when they leave. I am filled with an incredible amount of sadness and an incredible amount of pain as I stand here, as I lost someone who was like a brother to me. We knew each other for 45 years, and I'm not going to talk about a lot of the things that people have already said, but we also had a very emotionally intimate friendship. We shared the deaths of our parents and the pain that was in a very private way. We shared the pain and loss of our divorces, which was incredibly painful to both of us. We also shared the joy of Sandy finding Kathy and myself finding Diane, and what a joy that was. And that we kept that intimate and emotionally close friendship all the way until he died. I had the opportunity to go up to Everett 4 times to say goodbye in the last 4 months, and each time I went, I said everything I could possibly think and feel to say to him, because I felt, well, I'll never see him again. And then he hung on, and I went back 3 or 4 weeks later, and I said it again. I added some things that I hadn't thought of. I went back again. And every one of those was an incredibly powerful and loving and joyful and painful experience. And the second to last time I was there, on the way out the door, I was hugging him from his shoulders. He was sitting down. He was pretty weak, and I kissed him on the top of the head, and he said, thank you. And I said, man, I can't tell you how much I love you. And he said, I know, and right back at you. So on November 9th, my wife and I were leaving for India, and we thought, I think this is probably it. So I couldn't sleep, so I got up in the middle of the night, and I wrote him a love letter. And I sent it to Kathy, and I said, would you read this to Sandy while he's still lucid? Which he did, and I guess he smiled and said a couple of kind words, and I'm not looking for praise or appreciation, but just, I had to say one more thing to him. So here's the letter. Diane and I are leaving for India this morning. We will be thinking about you throughout the trip. Much of the following I have said to you in person, but I feel the need to put my thoughts and feelings about you on paper. Written words have a permanence that conversations do not. First, I want to thank you for being a close and steadfast friend over these past 45 years. From the days of our young adulthood until today, you have been a strong source of support that I can rely on through the ups and downs of life. Each of us have had our shares of big ups and downs over these many years, and both of us found ways to be there for each other. For this, I am most appreciative. You are like a brother to me. I also want to thank you for having been a political mentor. You and David were particularly influential in helping me get started in a life of activism. As the years have gone by, I have continued to value our discussions about what is happening here, what do we do, and how do we explain it to people so they can discover their own voice and power to act in the world. I give you credit for helping to shape my worldview. Everyone that I have helped and inspired over these many years owe you a debt of gratitude, even if virtually none of them knew of your influence on me. Third, it has been a delight to see what a dedicated and loving father and grandfather you are and have been. Being around you with your sons as well as talking with you about them has been special for me. They are lucky to have such a thoughtful, caring, and nurturing father. Fourth, I am so delighted that you have found such a wonderful life partner in Kathy. She is a gem. She really is. The two of you have brought so much love and joy into each other's lives, and being around that energy is a source of joy and uplift. You've had many good years together, and I toast the two of you. Diane and I have certainly benefited from your gourmet cooking. Fifth, I have tremendous respect for you for your life decision to stand with the oppressed peoples of the world and to forego what could have been a highly lucrative career with many more creature comforts. You came from a life of privilege. You clearly made a conscious decision to reject your class privilege and use your great education, intellect, and skills to serve the people. This is one of the best things that I can say about you or any person. You understood the times that we were in and made a choice to stand for a better collective future for people and not merely a comfortable life free from the concerns about the needs of the people on our planet. Right on, Sandy. Sixth, your incredible breadth of intellect has been wonderful to be around. I have never stopped commenting on the range of your interests and your ability to recall in detail the depths of your knowledge. Seventh, it has been fun these many years hanging out together, even if we haven't lived in the same city for at least 2/3 of our friendship. We made a conscious decision to stay connected and not let distance be a barrier to an intimate, ongoing, valued friendship. I have a smile on my face as I write this at 5:20 this morning. Someone much wiser than me once said, it is our responsibility to plant trees under which we may never have the time to sit under and enjoy the shade. That's your life, Sandy. Both of us have done this with our lives. In closing, my dear friend, I look forward to seeing you again. I know you are struggling, and I wish I had a magic wand to take away the pain and the loss of energy. Unfortunately, I don't have such a tool. Absent that, I am sending my love, respect, and admiration by paper and over the 1,000 miles from India to Everett. With much love, take care, my friend and compañero. I miss Sandy so much, but what I do know is the rest of my life I get to enjoy his memories. And there are two deaths that people experience. One is when they physically die. The other is when people stop talking about him. And I'm not going to stop talking about Sandy until I'm dead, so he's going to live at least another 25 years if I've got anything to say about it. So it's a sad moment, but what a happy moment to realize how much our lives have been enriched and touched by this wonderful, wonderful father, grandfather, husband, uncle, friend, comrade, compañero, and just all around good guy. So goodbye, Sandy, but you're in my heart forever. Thank you very much. The program's over. There's going to be cake, and they're going to run a 12.5-minute slideshow, so if you want to get a quick pictorial history of Sandy, let her rip. And it's so wonderful that all of you came here with your love to celebrate Sandy's life. Thank you.